Well, I appreciate Chairman Ware being flexible with me. Totally my fault. You get this time of year, there's lots and lots of meetings going on, and I had agreed to come to Paulding County some time ago, and then Cherokee invited me, and I said, "Hey, I'll come." And then I realized, oh man, I've double booked myself. So I very much appreciate y'all staying around, and I'll just be real brief and tell you a little bit about myself and my campaign. My name is Buzz Brockway, and currently I serve in the State House. I've been in the State House for 8 years now. I've been active in the Republican Party for 21 years, and worked my way up from a precinct captain, and from 2002 to 2005, I was chairman of the Gwinnett County Republican Party. And y'all might remember back in those days, the 7th, you might remember the 7th Congressional District kind of stretched across the northern, we called it the Golden Arc. It was Gwinnett and Forsyth and Cherokee and Bartow and Paulding. So we were actually all in the same congressional district together for a little while back when I was chairman. And we had a fun little race there. Bob Barr and John Linder, two great congressmen, ran against each other, and it wasn't very fun at all. Actually, it was a bloody fight among fellow Republicans. It was awful. But back in those days, the Republican Party was not the majority party in the state of Georgia. And if y'all remember, we flipped the state back in those days from the Democratic state to a Republican state. And Sonny Perdue became our first Republican governor since Reconstruction, and Saxby Chambliss became only our third U.S. Senator ever elected as a Republican from the state of Georgia at that time. So it was a lot of fun to be a part of that, to see the state transforming into a Republican state. And here we are 15, 16 years later, and we're the ones that are under assault. The Democrats are coming after us, and I tell you, as I've been traveling the state, I can tell you the Democrats are energized, and they are united. Like I've never seen them this energized and united as they are now. And really, it's about one thing: they want to stop Donald Trump, and they translate that into meaning any Republican that we see, we're going to try to beat him. And so I just want to make a plug for that. There are some great folks running for Secretary of State. Obviously, I'm working hard. I hope that I'm the nominee. I'm going to work hard to be the nominee. But if I'm not, I'm going to be proud to support whoever our nominee is. And I hope that after our primaries are over, and if we have runoffs in various races, that after that we can unite as a party. And I'm not saying we set aside our differences, but I'm saying that we need to put forward a positive and conservative agenda of growth and opportunity, and take that to the people of Georgia and say, this is what Republican government has done, this is what Republican government will do, and we don't want the left gaining a foothold and taking over this state. We want to continue to be able to implement conservative principles all across the state of Georgia. So anyway, that's a little bonus material. So what I'm doing as a candidate for Secretary of State to try to help that really is, I just want to talk about two things very briefly. Elections. Obviously, the Secretary of State works with your local elections officials to implement and oversee the elections here in Georgia. Our voting machines are old. As I've traveled the state, I've discovered in some places they're literally buying used machines off eBay, scavenging them for parts to keep other machines up and running. And that's a big problem. And we're going to have to address that. And what I want to see happen in the state of Georgia is I want to see us go to a system that has paper in it. So either a ballot that you mark by hand, or other types of systems that are out there. Because I want voters to be able to look and say, yes, these are the people that I voted for, and this matches how my vote is counted. The second thing that I'm a big proponent of, as well as my friend here and fellow Representative Scott Turner, post-election audits. For a long time I worked in manufacturing. And in manufacturing you design a part, you manufacture it, and you don't just stick it in a box and ship it, you check it. They have a whole regime they call quality assurance. We need quality assurance in elections. We need to use statistical sampling to take these paper ballots and check them and see, do these ballots match up with the reported results? And I think if we can do that, we can assure the people of Georgia and the voters of Georgia that their vote was counted and counted accurately. There's a poll taken about 4 months ago now, that said that 59% of Democrats are convinced, not just that the Russians tried to influence elections, but 59% of Democrats are convinced that Russians actually hacked machines and changed votes. And 53% of Republicans are convinced that there are millions of people who are voting illegally. Now, set aside whatever you think about those two theories. The problem is, we're getting to the point in this country where no matter who wins an election, there are going to be large numbers of people who are going to look at the winner and say, that person got there by some sort of fraud. And that's a big problem, and we've got to hit that head on. And I think if we have an open and transparent process in selecting a new voting system, that I think we can go a long way toward doing that and have these post-election audits. The second thing I'll mention very briefly is professional licensing. The Secretary of State oversees works with about 41 professional licensing boards. And in my time in the House, what I've seen is this creeping effort to require more and more professional licenses. We've had 4 or 5 of them since I've been there. Lactation consultants, several others that you kind of, music therapists, others that you kind of scratch your head and say, why is the state of Georgia licensing these things? What's happening is we've gone from an economy 50 years ago where about 5% of the workforce worked in a profession that needed a professional license, to now almost 30% of the workforce needs some sort of professional license. And who this hurts, quite frankly, are people who are on the lower end of our economic system, who are maybe single moms, who are trying to lift themselves up and their families up out of poverty, and there's the government giving the stiff arm. So we've got to fight against this. And I authored, there's an entity in state government called the Georgia Occupation Regulation Review Council that's supposed to perform periodic reviews with each licensing board to say, where that licensing board says, here's why this profession needs to be licensed, and here are the regulations on it. And I found that entity is not doing it. So I can promise you, Secretary of State is one of the members of that review council. I can promise you, if I'm Secretary of State, we're going to perform those periodic reviews. We're going to arm the legislature with that information, and we're going to work with them to roll back this regulation. And some of them, like librarians, I trust your local library board to decide who should work in their library. I don't really think that the state of Georgia needs to have a license for librarians. So I think some of them can be handled locally, some of them can be handled by a professional organization and don't need government involvement. But we need to work with the legislature to get that done. So that's something that I very much will work on as Secretary of State. Last thing I'll tell you, and again, I appreciate you being flexible, allowing me to come here and wrap up your meeting and speak last, but there's some great folks, as I mentioned, running for Secretary of State, but I think what separates me from the other candidates is this. I don't look at the office of Secretary of State and think, I'm going to be there for 4 or 8 years or whatever, twiddling my thumbs, waiting for some other office to open up so I can go and run for that. I want to be the Secretary of State of Georgia. I'm a nerd. I went to Georgia Tech, and that draws applause in some places and boos in others, but what that means is I look at some of the things the Secretary of State does, and I think, that looks fun. Sitting around and thinking about how to make lines on election day shorter, that excites me. Thinking about how can we process new business creations faster and get people in business and eliminate the bottlenecks in that system, that excites me. And so I want to stay, as long as the voters allow it and the Lord allows it, I want to stay in the office of Secretary of State until I've accomplished several goals that I have. I want Georgia to have the best election system in America, and I want us to be not just considered the best state to do business in, but the easiest state to do business in. And Lord willing, I'll stay there as long as it takes to do that. And last thing I'll say, one of my favorite movies is the movie Braveheart. And there's a great scene in there, I think, that speaks to our political time right now. And that's that William Wallace looks at the Scottish nobles and says to them, you think that the people exist to provide you with a position, but I think your position exists to provide people with freedom. And no matter what office it is, whether it's Secretary of State or Governor or City Councilman, these offices were created by our laws and by our Constitution really to do one thing, and that's to protect the freedom of the people of Georgia. And I can promise you, if I'm your Secretary of State, I'm going to wake up every day and I'm going to remember my #1 job is to protect your freedom. So I would love to have your vote on May 22nd. I'm very proud to have the support of my good friend, Representative Scott Turner, Representative Michael Caldwell, and Representative Wes Cantrell, and Representative Ballinger here that represent parts of Cherokee County are all supporting my campaign. I'm very honored by that. And we've got some literature in the back, and I'm on Instagram at Buzz Brockway, and Twitter at Buzz Brockway, and my Facebook page is Vote for Buzz, and my website is votebuzz.com, and I even have a LinkedIn account. I don't even know what to do with it, but I've got one. But I appreciate the opportunity, and I would love to have your vote on May 22nd. Thank you very much.
state there?
Yes, yes.
What do you think about the initiatives he's taken to tighten up the voter rolls in that state?
I think overall he's done a really good job. I think he's implemented a lot of stuff, and actually, state of Georgia participates in something that he initiated, which is Kansas leads an effort with about 30 other states, and we compare voter lists, and what you're looking for is see who's moved and what state to make sure that we don't have duplicate registrations in other states. That's been very, very helpful in helping Georgia keep its voter rolls clean. So.
You say you've been in the House for a while. What kind of legislation have you initiated and carried through that's been where you carried the water?
Sure, there's been a number of them. My first term, I carried an elections reform bill working with Brian Kemp. It implemented a whole lot of stuff. One item of that was to allow local elections officials to look through the obituaries. I know that sounds kind of morbid, but it empowers local elections officials to look for folks who've passed away, and then they can begin the process of removing those folks from the polls. The most recent bill I passed a bill that would allow college students, and actually any person on a college campus, to carry a stun gun with them for personal protection. And there's been numerous other bills. I'd be happy to talk about any one.
Speaking about college students, I've heard rumors that some of them are voting twice. They're voting in their college town and then they're going home and voting. Would you be interested in cracking down on that? Because double voting definitely negates other voters.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, ma'am. And this is why what Kansas does is so important. We compare the voter lists of other states and make sure that people aren't double registered, and if they are, then we got to determine what their real state is that they really live in, and kick them off the other list. So yes.
I'm talking about in Georgia. There's a lot of kids in Athens, that live other places.
Sure. Absolutely. We've got to. Keeping the voter list clean is an incredibly important job, and the left is fighting us tooth and nail on that. There's numerous lawsuits right now to block that, but you have to do it. And I would press through no matter what those lawsuits are. We'd follow the law, which the law, federal and state law, requires us to do proper list maintenance, and that would include removing any person who's double registered, whether they're college students or not.
Would you pursue prosecution of those folks?
Absolutely, yes. Other questions, ma'am? Are great, thank you. Yes, sir.
Would you share the story of the presentation we saw on Monday?
Yeah, it's rather scary. So Representative Turner and I, which Representative Turner has been a leader on this effort to modernize our voting system, he had a great bill this year. Unfortunately, I won't bore you with the story, but we couldn't get it passed. But anyway, we came in contact with a professor at Georgia Tech, who brought down a gentleman from Michigan who came down and showed us, who's a cybersecurity expert, and showed us how you could hack the voting machines that we currently have right now. And it was scarily easy. There's a data card that is inserted into the side of the machine, and it's under lock and key. And there's if you follow the proper security procedures, you'll be okay. But it creates a single point of potential vulnerability, because on that card is contained all the ballots, all the various ballots that might be used, say, in Cherokee County. So it was previously done at Kennesaw State. This year, I think it'll be done inside the Secretary of State's office. Those cards are programmed, and the ballots are inserted for all the various precincts in Cherokee County. They'd be sent to the Cherokee County Board of Elections, who would then distribute them to where they're supposed to go, and they'd insert them in the machine. This guy showed that if you don't keep that single point secure, then somebody could insert malicious code on there that could change votes. And we did it. Scott and I, he invited 4 of us up, and we got to vote on this machine, and our choices were George Washington versus Benedict Arnold. Scott and I voted for George Washington. 2 other people got up and voted for Benedict Arnold for some crazy reason. So we all watched this, and so we knew there were 2 votes to 2 votes for each of the 2 candidates. He then went through the procedures to close the machine out and produce the results, and it printed out the tape just like it happens now. and it was 3-1 in favor of Benedict Arnold. So he had inserted malicious code on that card that would change enough votes to produce the outcome that he wanted. And so this can happen. It absolutely can happen. And what I would suggest this year is that you may have read recently the federal government is giving Georgia $10 million to help us with our voting election system. I would suggest that what we do right now for 2018 is we take some of that money, however much we need, and we put that into security to make sure that that point of vulnerability and other points of vulnerability in our system are shored up and insured against any sort of failure or attack. And then, my goal, and then Scott shares this goal, is by 2020, we have new voting machines and a new voting system in place in the state of Georgia that's much more secure, much more modern, and that our people of Georgia can trust. But thank you, Representative, for bringing that up. And Don, thank you very much again for being flexible with me and allowing me to come. And I'll be back here Monday night, actually. You folks are hosting a forum for Secretary of State's candidates, and I will be there. So I'll look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you.